Hello and welcome to the SciFirst MovieTalk episode. So, in this episode, I'll be discussing the 1999 horror comedy movie Idle Hands, as directed by Rodman Flender. The film centres around Anton Tobias, as played by Devon Sawa, a lazy stoner, whose daily routine pretty much consists of sitting in front of the TV and smoking weed. At the beginning of the movie, at Halloween, we witness the murder of his parents, as played by Fred Willard and Connie Ray. And it later transpires that it was Anton that committed the murders. So that's not technically a spoiler, as it basically does set up the premise for the whole film from the very start. So, in actual fact, it wasn't Anton, it was his hand, which has been possessed by an entity that searches out the laziest layabout it can find nearby and forces them to commit murders. Anton's hand then proceeds to kill his best friends, Mick and Pnub, as played by Seth Green and Eldon Henson respectively, but they can't be bothered to actually take the journey to heaven. Seems like too much like hard work, so it was just too far for them to go. And so basically come back as the undead and continue to hang out with Anton. Luckily, there's no hard feelings. Realising his hand is now evil, Anton opts to cut it off, trying a number of hilarious ways prior to cleaving it off. The now severed hand then continues its one-arm killing spree, heading towards the local school Halloween dance to drag the soul of Anton's girlfriend, Molly, as played by Jessica Alba, to hell. So, this was a film that was blasted when it first came out, and indeed is considered to be a box office bomb. But, over the years, I believe it's garnered somewhat of a little bit of a cult following, and I can certainly see why, I absolutely had a blast with this movie. It was cheesy, goofy, and downright silly at times, but that's the thing. It was supposed to be. Do not, whatever you do, go into this movie expecting a serious horror movie at all. The movie is basically a stoner comedy. Drugs, namely pot, feature quite prominently as part of the comedy and even part of the action. But it doesn't have the incoherent babble that you get with a Seth Rogen comedy. Sorry if you're a fan. But seriously, the film does glorify the use of pot, even though it is Anton's stoner lifestyle that caused the entity to possess his hands in the first place. Idle hands make for the devil's work, after all. So if this kind of comedy isn't your cup of tea, then I would seriously avoid this film on that basis. Me, personally, I can appreciate the comedy for what it is, absolutely. I have never touched pot in my life. And I don't advocate its use. But that's my personal opinion. I don't preach it to anybody else, and ultimately I can see the funny side of things, at least as far as the film is concerned. Its inclusion in the film makes sense, given its overall context, and I'm sorry, it's just simply hilarious at times. The film is somewhere between a parody and a spoof, absolutely zany, full of cliches and borrowing elements of many other horror and teen movies to make quite the mix of tongue-in-cheek comedy and horror. Taking an affectionate, if but outrageous, poke at such films in the genre. The main one, of course, is the premise of the possessed killer hand and the scenes involving this therein, especially when Anton is fighting with himself, including a fight for the TV remote after killing his friends. This whole setup is of course ripped straight from the Evil Dead franchise, when the hero of that movie series, Ash, as brilliantly played by Bruce Campbell, also cuts off his own hand for pretty much the same reasons. We also have elements of 1988's Waxwork and the American Werewolf series, to name just a few. It starts with an almost 80s kind of slasher feel, but then follows with a distinctly 90s vibe, but then kind of just completely mixes the two throughout. Amongst the very excellent comedy moments, we have Anton pushing his dog out into the stairwell to see what's happening at an opportune moment. It isn't so much the act of doing this than the perceived look of fear on the dog's face. I mean, watch out for that scene. I can't really do it justice. The fight scenes between Anton and his hand are also brilliantly crafted. They're over the top, most definitely, but again, very reminiscent of the style and even the cinematography used in The Evil Dead. I'm sure the intent was perhaps to pay homage to this series rather than just simply ripping off the idea. We also have the Bodgit Dead in the form of Mick and Pnub, who find hilarious ways to keep themselves together, which involves setting Pnub's head to his body with a skewer and strapping his head to his body with gaffer tape, making for a great undead comedy duo. Comedy aside, however, this movie does actually have a number of jump scares, for those of us that look like them, and some tense and gruesome moments, especially towards the end, bringing in a more of the horror element that was there. The whole movie, though, like I said, is meant to be taken very tongue-in-cheek, with some very over-the-top acting and most certainly cheesy, but great practical special effects. CGI, not so much, but very corny, but meant to be so. Very much designed to fit the tone of the movie. By the end of the movie, it is, of course, the hand itself that steals the show. Hands down. Sorry. I had to do that, but anyway. The movie also features quite a decent soundtrack, with a good mix of punk rock and heavy metal artists that were kind of around at the time the movie was released. Nothing spectacular, but definitely in the tone of the movie overall, and befitting of its total insanity at times. It definitely had that, very much that teen movie, high school feel that movies of the late 90s kind of had in droves, to be fair. So overall, this film will not be everybody's cup of tea, and I won't even try and pass it off as such. It is perhaps quite niche, but I think it is quite underrated, personally. It does have a certain quirky quality, if you do like your horror films, and it takes inspiration from so many, while taking a real light-hearted poke at the genre. Trying to kind of claw back some of that nostalgia for some of the B-movies and the physical effects movies of the 1980s. It's a movie that's just stupid enough, it actually works in my book. It's actually quite clever in the way that it's put together, and definitely a teen movie with a difference. So, that brings me to the end of this episode. Thank you very much for watching. I do hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please leave a like down below. Please do hit that subscribe button for more movie reviews, more trailer reactions, and more movie-related episodes. But most of all, thank you very much for stopping by. We've loved having you. But yes, thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.